This lesson is a continuation of statistics where we will be talking about tally tables, frequency tables, and how to include percents in those tables. So in past lessons, we've talked about what statistics means and also the definition for data or data. And a lot of the times, data or data is collected in terms of using numbers, especially when we were dealing with mean, median, mode, and range. Here, though, I thought that we would just discuss some of the ways in which data can be collected in other ways besides just, asking questions. So, for example, one of the main things that a lot of people overlook in terms of data collection is surveys, is by providing surveys. That's a way that you can collect data. And we're going to focus on that today, is doing a survey. There are many, many different types of surveys, so we're going to hold off on it because I do want to mention that there are other ways in which you can collect data. So while we're going to be focusing on surveys, you can also obtain data from things like the internet. You could also collect data from newspapers. By measuring things, you can collect data because that's the measurement itself is a form of data. And one other thing that's often overlooked is just by observing. You can collect data by just doing some observations of things going on around you. But now we're going to talk about surveys. There are different ways in which you can collect data by surveys. You can do it through the mail, you can do it on the phone, you can do it online, you can do it face-to-face. And the people you ask are the population. So a survey needs a population. A population is usually all of the people involved. If you only pick part of the people, for example, if you instead decided to survey just the secondary ones as opposed to the whole school, we say that you are obtaining a sample. So population and sample of the population are two very, very important words because we're going to be using it. I do want to talk to you about something that's really interesting called a census. A census is a type of survey which is done for everybody. A census is done for the entire population. Usually censuses are given for data about the population of countries or cities, something very, very big, a huge population. So a census is also a very important word for you to know. However, today we are going to be focusing on surveys in this video lesson, surveys of a sample, surveys of a population. And we're going to do that by learning about how to tally, how to calculate the frequency, and then how to calculate the percent. So let's begin. A tally is a way that you can measure counting numbers. So a tally is usually a line, and I'm going to write that here. A tally is, we're going to say a number that is represented by lines. Now I think the easiest way to talk about tallies are single lines like this until you get to the number 5. And so we group it in groups of 5. This here is equal to 5 votes, 5 things, 5 people. This denotes 5. And then usually if you have something like this, this means 10. However, if you only have 4 lines like this, it represents 4. So there's actually a very good thing here. This is the tally, and that's what we're going to talk about in this chart on this slide here. But we're not going to forget about this number that I'm highlighting or underlining in blue, because we're going to talk about that in the next slide. If I were to ask people what their favorite color was, and I'm just going to randomly say that, people voted for red, I'm going to tally how many people voted for red, and we're going to just pretend that this many people said red. We're going to pretend that this many people said purple, and we're going to pretend that this many people said green. And that's how you would tally. You would ask people and you would do it like this. Now, why is tallying an easy thing or helpful for people who are collecting data? It's easy for you to just put a tick here, as opposed to you counting everybody and then totaling it. It's a very helpful way for you to do things like online surveys, face-to-face surveys, telephone surveys. This is very easy for people. Now at the very bottom of my chart here, I have something very important called the total. You don't necessarily need it when you're doing a tally, but you're going to need that row here for when we deal with frequency. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this table here, now that we're done with tallies. I'm going to copy this table onto a new slide, and I'm actually going to see if I can make it a little bit smaller, just because I'm going to be adding another column onto our tally table. So I'm going to create just one more column here for now, and I'm going to extend these lines here. And the title of our new column is going to be called frequency. Now there's a key word in here, frequent. Frequent can be defined as like how often it shows up. And basically what this means, the frequency, is just the number. So you're going to convert your tallies into the actual standard notation, the number. In this case, in our first tally, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 tallies. So the frequency is that 4 people said red in our imaginary scenario. In here, it's so easy because I know that this is 5, right? And I know that this is 3. So 5 plus 3 is 8 people voted for purple in our imaginary survey. And here, 5, 5, and 2 is 10 plus 2, which is 12. Now, wasn't that nice to have the tallies? Because the tallies make it easier for you to also count at the end. Not only does it help you when you're collecting data, but it helps you to count the total numbers at the end. Now, this is where the total column actually comes into play. So we actually want the total number of people. How many people did we survey? So if we count here 4 plus 8 plus 12, that's 24 as a total, which means that you probably asked 24 people in our imaginary survey. It also helps to do this because imagine if you had 25 people, but then you actually only count 24. It means you're missing a data, and that's a good way for you to check that you have all of the total data. So that's easy, that's the frequency. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to once again take our table, except this time with the frequency column, and I'm going to create another new slide. Only this time I'm going to add another column, a last column in this video lesson. Oh, actually I'm going to just extend these lines. The last column is called the percent. You'll also see it as percent distribution. Now, I want you to think of this as though you were trying to calculate the mark that you got on a test. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zoom in on these two columns here, and I'm also going to change the color. Now, I want to know, it's great that 4 people said red, but what is the percentage of people who said red? Now, in this case, we have 4 people who said red out of how many total people? We have 24 total people. So it's as though we have 4 over 24. So another way of helping you out as to calculating the percent is you're always going to be doing the frequency divided by the total, for sure. But if you know, that's not going to give you the percent. If I do 4 divided by 24, it's not going to give me the percent, it's going to give me the decimal. So we have to do one more step, and it's multiplying it by 100, which I feel like a lot of you would know at this point as well. So I'm going to add that here. We also need to multiply by 100, and we get something like 16.67%. And voila, we have found the percent. So on the bottom here, I'm also going to say times 100, just so that we're all on the same page, and I'm going to highlight it so we know that that's what we're doing for the percents column. Now we're not done because we also have purple and green. So let me zoom in here, and I'm going to just make this smaller, and I'm going to do, okay, so for this color here, which was purple, we have 8 people who voted for purple out of a total of 24 people times 100. So taking out our calculators, we do 8 divided by 24, and that's equal to 0.3333. We're going to multiply that by 100, and we're going to get approximately 33.33%. Now notice that I'm rounding. Okay, I'm rounding. The last one here is 12 people out of 24 times 100. So 12 people out of 24, just in case you're not sure where I got my numbers. 12 divided by 24 times 100 is 50%. Now, don't ignore this total row here. If we're dealing with percents and we are dealing with a total, can you guess right now what you think the total over here should be if we're dealing with all of the people? So let's calculate it. If we do 16.67 plus 33.33, remember we rounded, plus 50, look what we got. We got 100%. And honestly, that's what the total for this column should always be equal to. This total should always be equal to 100%. But sometimes when we're rounding, you might not get 100%. You might get 99 or 98, and that's fine because you've rounded. But you have to have a total that is close to or exactly equal to 100%. If you don't, you did something wrong, go back and check your work. But it should always equal to 100%. And this entire table here, and I'm going to put it here in purple, this table here is called a frequency table. And when we're dealing with statistics, it's always nice to title it. We would title it what it's actually trying to show us. This case, our imaginary survey is trying to show us a frequency table of, say, fave colors. And that's the title. That's the title of our frequency table. But a frequency table will always have those three columns: the tally column, the frequency column, and the percent column, and of course here being the data that we are collecting, red, purple, and green in this case, with a total row at the end. The tally table, or the tally column, doesn't necessarily need one of these. I'm going to write here, not necessary. If you fill it out, no worries. But these ones here are very necessary. You absolutely need to have those. And that is how you create a frequency table by collecting data through surveys.